Good evening to everyone on the call. We do appreciate you being a part of this call here this evening concerning House Bill 91, which was discussed today in the Senate Education and Higher Education Committee, as presented by Senator Sawyers, Senators McGinnis, and Senator Johnson. We do have several dignitaries on the call this evening. My name is James Alverson. I'm the Assistant Commissioner of the North Carolina High School Athletic Association. On the call with me this evening is the Commissioner of the High School Athletic Association, Ms. Q Tucker, and she will speak on behalf of the NCHSAA. Also on for the NCHSAA is our past president, Jerry Simmons, who is the principal at New Bern High School. And has been president of the association for the entirety of the last year. Dr. Rob Jackson, who is the superintendent of Carteret County Schools, is our vice president for this upcoming year. He's been on our board for the last 4 years, and he is also on the call this evening from the board and the NCHSAA perspective. From the North Carolina Coaches Association, we're very, very pleased and grateful that a co-executive director, Mr. Mac Morris, is on the call with us here this evening, as well as executive secretary, Mr. Joe Franks. They'll provide some comments from the Coaches Association, and we appreciate their time today. As we know, they're very, very busy. They've got the Coaches Clinic going on and the East-West All-Star Games over in Greensboro, and we appreciate them making some time. And also Mr. Roy Turner, who is the executive director of the North Carolina Athletic Directors Coaches Association, is on this call as well, and he will make some comments on behalf of their organization. But without further ado, I will turn things over to Commissioner Q Tucker of the High School Athletic Association. I will ask you, media members, if you would, please keep your audio muted this evening until we recognize you for some questions following the opening comments from our panel. So Q, take it away.
Thank you, James. And let me thank our members of the media who have availed themselves to be with us this evening, along with others who we feel perhaps have something to say in light of what we've all heard this afternoon. Let me start by just addressing the association's history and our governance. The North Carolina High School Athletic Association really has a very proud history spanning almost 110 years that demonstrates the capability and the desire of member association schools to successfully provide self-governance and leadership for the conduct of education-based high school athletics in our state. The 427 member schools, which is what we have going into this school year, have governed the association, serving as members of the NCHSAA Board of Directors, voting on association matters, and overseeing the activities of the association through representations in their region as well as the classification. Those are spoken to by our bylaws, and so throughout our history, we have followed the bylaws very faithfully in how we govern the membership, or how the membership governs itself. Our membership, as well as the boards of directors, have established and recognized that they, the members of this association, know what is best for students in our state regarding high school athletics, the decision-making, as well as the regulations that must be followed. Now, let's speak specifically to this legislative involvement, and specifically House Bill 91, which we were made aware of first thing this morning. So to say that we've had very little time to really digest everything that is in that bill really is an understatement. But their discussion this afternoon, as it relates to House Bill 91, represents what we believe to be a full-scale attack on the ability and desire of the NCHSAA member schools to govern their own affairs as it relates to high school athletics, education-based athletics. We believe that high school athletics in our state should not be a political issue. And when you start peeling away or turning the pages of that bill, clearly there are politics involved in how this new commission that they have mentioned would be established. We want what is best for the students in North Carolina, and particularly the student athletes in our program. We believe that many members of the General Assembly are motivated to that end as well. We have demonstrated our willingness to partner with the General Assembly, and they mentioned that. And we want to work towards our goal of being the national model for education-based athletics in the country. We implore the members of the General Assembly to recognize the outstanding work that we have done, are doing, and look forward to doing in high school athletics in our state. We have invited them to share in good faith. We've done that. If they have ideas to improve the NCHSAA or would like to discuss matters pertaining to the association, the NCHSAA board and the staff hopes that legislators will participate in a productive and positive way to improving high school and youth athletics for our membership. However, we feel it is unlikely at best that students in our state will be the benefactors if changes such as what we see in House Bill 91, if the suggestions that have been made, if those are under the threat of legislative takeover, it cannot be in the best interest of our students. So thank you again for being with us, and we look forward to addressing your questions and sharing further insight.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Tucker. I will now turn things over to Joe Franks and Mac Morris at the Coaches Association, and I'll ask them to provide a statement or comment on behalf of the Coaches Association. So Mac or Joe, you guys take it away.
Okay, thank you, James. Our board of directors at its Sunday meeting, July the 18th, voted unanimously to write a letter showing our support for the NCHSAA as the governing body of the interscholastic athletics in North Carolina. This hadn't been done yet because we've been tied up with the coaching clinic and the All-Star game, but it certainly will be put in writing and sent in Monday of next week. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mac. Joe, do you have anything to add?
No, James, I think what Max said is a statement of fact based on the board meeting that we had on July the 18th.
Thank you very much, Joe. And now I'll ask Roy Turner, the Executive Director for the North Carolina Athletic Directors Association, to add some comments on behalf of that association. So Roy, if you are ready, go ahead.
James, I appreciate you letting us to share and express our thoughts. The North Carolina Athletic Directors Association just completed 2 days of board meetings in Greensboro this weekend. And we drafted again, we discussed, but we talked about our current situation, and we have fully supported the NCHSAA over the life of this organization for the past 49 years. And we continue to support the leadership, the policies and procedures, and the position statements of the NCHSAA. Just in the last couple of weeks, Joe and Mac know that we worked collaboratively together to work on subcommittee, making recommendations for a subcommittee for an advisory board for our endowment fund. But again, we just continue to understand, and we know that there's politics, and I know Q alluded to this a little bit, but in this situation, politics and athletics should not meet. I just had an opportunity. I've been traveling all day long to South Dakota for a National Executive Directors Council meeting, and looking at that 14 pages, as I look at some of those, that is so unrealistic and how that will actually work, because I don't think anyone understands all of the moving parts of this organization. And more importantly, the value of education-based athletics that is currently under attack. So again, we've had a couple phone calls with some folks this afternoon, but we are going to rally the troops as much as we can, and we're going to let our voices be heard from the athletic on behalf of the athletic directors in North Carolina, our 427 schools. And again, we're going to speak for the 300,000+ student athletes that are currently involved in this athletic program.
Thank you very much, Roy. Certainly appreciate all of you, and I will provide an opportunity for past President Simmons to add any comments if he would like to, or Dr. Jackson, our Vice President. Either of you gentlemen would like to say anything at this time.
Thank you, James, and I'll just yield the floor to Rob, but I do want to say President Wilkins was not available this evening on short notice, so I do apologize for that. But I, like many of us, I watched the actions of our General Assembly this afternoon, and it hurt me. It really did. Having served with the athletic directors and principals and superintendents who comprise our board of directors for the State Athletic Association, I know all of us only want what's best for our student athletes, and I can extend that same sentiment to Commissioner Tucker and our staff. So we all want what's best, and if any of us thought that this legislation was best for our student athletes, then we would fully get behind it. But that's simply not the case. We have made moves to try to find something in the way of a compromise with the General Assembly, and we just haven't been met in that regard. And I will say, even prior to that, we as the board of directors and the association staff, we worked even before all of this began. We've worked to try to move in a direction that we thought was gonna be better for our student athletes and our member schools, and that came in the way of our realignment model that we've adopted, that moves toward more equitable processes. We have been, I'll just say it, we've been reactive to the changing landscape of high schools in our state. We didn't ask for, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but we didn't ask for things to change and even more charter schools to be on board, but we have done everything we can, understanding they're doing everything they can to serve students and student athletes as well. And even homeschool, that was a big part of the conversation this afternoon, but we've made moves over a year ago to involve our homeschool students in our communities in high school sports. So we don't have our ears closed to some of the things that are being asked of us, but I will say that we feel like the very best thing that can happen right now is a partnership between our state athletic association and our school board, state school board, versus anything that would possibly look to dissolve what has been in place for over a century. And Dr. Jackson, if you have anything to add.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, James. And thank you, Commissioner Tucker, for the opportunity to speak very briefly. I also want to thank the Coaches Association and Athletic Directors Association for your statements of support. Just over 4 years ago, it was an incredible honor when I was elected by my peers and colleagues to represent our member schools as a longtime high school principal and superintendent. Advocating for students, advocating for student athletes, advocating for schools is the passion of my career. And I've been honored to do that as a part of the board of directors, and was extremely honored when I was elected to continue in that service next year as the vice president. One of the things I think is important to continue to reiterate is that we are a member-driven organization. The board of directors is made up of representatives, coaches, athletic directors, superintendents, principals of our schools. Our conversations in my 4 years have been focused exclusively on our student athletes and doing our very best for every single young man and woman who participates in the sports. I think a demonstration of that passion, commitment, and dedication has been this last year. All that was done by Commissioner Tucker and the staff to make sports a reality during the pandemic when we weren't sure if that would happen. And then for our board to really dig deep and to continue to look for ways to support our schools. And I was very proud when we were able to identify the $4 million that was able to be sent back to our schools to help with the costs that were incurred this past year because we didn't have fans in the stands. And then going so far as to have a committee to really look at how to distribute that money in a way that was as fair and equitable as possible. And so I'll simply say that I believe in the High School Athletic Association. I've been proud to serve in the High School Athletic Association, and I appreciate the absolute dedication of men and women on the board of directors to our student athletes and to serving our schools. And so again, thank you for the opportunity to share.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jackson, and all of our folks who have already spoken on this call. With that, we will open the floor up to your questions. I do know that Joe and Mac have a soccer game to get to, the East-West All-Star game that is going on, so they may not be able to stick around much longer. But please, if you do have questions, members of the media, use the participants menu and raise your hand. I will recognize you at that time, and you can unmute your mic to ask your questions of whichever panelists you would like to talk with. So with that, we'll take your questions at this time. Please use the participants menu to raise your hand, and we'll go first to Joe Serrera at the News and Record in Greensboro. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a question for Commissioner Tucker and for anyone on the board. State senators today said that they claim that they hadn't gotten any responses to their concerns from the association. It sounds like you're saying that isn't the case. What's your interaction with them been like, and how have you addressed the concerns that they've expressed to you?
Hugh, you're muted if you want to take that one. Sorry.
My fault. Sorry, Joe. I think everybody is aware that we received the invite to come to the General Assembly to address a series of questions. Once they put together this subcommittee, then obviously we were invited to attend, and that was slated for April the 15th. Prior to that, we had been receiving requests from Senator McGinnis, Senator Johnson, and Senator Sawyer. And I will be honest, when they first asked me for the financial information back last May 2020, I would not give it to them right away. Because first of all, this is a membership organization, and I personally did not think that I had the prerogative to just be giving that information out to our General Assembly with no real reason why it was being asked for. But obviously, I reached out to others who said, yes, Q, you need to give that information, and so I did. So in August and September of 2020, I did respond to them. In November of 2020, Senator Sawyer reached out for the very first time. Senator Sawyer got into this whole discussion in November of 2020. Prior to that, it was Senator McGinnis and Senator Johnson who were driving this, the inquiry. And so Senator McGinnis, Senator Sawyer asked about monies and starting a grant program. At that point, I shared with her that we had already established a grant program. And then our board met, and in 2020, in December, which was shortly after Senator McGinnis or Senator Sawyer suggested that information about the grant program, we had already as a staff started to talk about some things that we wanted to ask our board to consider. And that's when we presented to them this idea of looking at the endowment and looking at a way to help financially. Our board approved, as you heard Mr. Jackson say, that we approved that $4 million to be distributed to the schools. So shortly thereafter, then I received a request, Joe, from Senator McGinnis, Senator Sawyer, and Senator Johnson to appear in their office at the General Assembly, which I did, December the 10th. I went, and I was blindsided with the amount of information that they had spread out on the table. They had all of our 990s for the last, I don't know how many years. And so they I went through an inquiry from them for about 2 hours. I think Senator Sawyer said that today that, it was at that time when I met with them that they made the decision that they needed to go further. And so they did. And at the end of December, they sought additional financial information, which we spent several weeks, the first part of 2021 gathering, and we sent that to them. Then we received that letter that this subcommittee had been put in place. We appeared before them on April 15th. When that meeting was about to conclude, Senator Berger said to me, well, Ms. Tucker, that concludes our time together today. We do not have another meeting set at this time, but as we move forward, we will be, I'm sure the committee will meet more, and we will ask you, I'm sure, for additional information. I have not received another request from Senator Berger nor Representative Moore to appear before them. Not long after that, I received word that there would be another hearing, but that hearing would involve Superintendent Truitt. It would involve the former Vice President of the State Board of Education, Buddy Collins, and the chair of the school board from Union County. We were not invited to participate in that discussion. And at the same time that all of that was happening, I received individual requests from Senator McGinnis. One of his requests was share with us the amount of monies that you have fined people, which we provided. He obviously, that you all have seen all of those figures. And then not long after that, somewhere over in May, or perhaps it was early June, I received another letter from Senator McGinnis asking about the PSAs that he had heard on the radio. And he wanted to know how much money we spent on those PSAs, why we needed them, and to give information for the last so many years. And so, not knowing what he meant, I didn't know what PSAs he was talking about. I sent an email and asked. I did not get any clarification. So the only supposition we could make was that he was talking about the PSAs that we receive every year from the National Federation. They put together a series of PSAs dealing with different subject matters, such as mental health issues, bullying, fan behavior, etc. They put a tagline at the bottom of each of those. Is the tagline for the North Carolina High School Athletic Association and the North Carolina Athletic Directors Association. This year, they were sent out, and I believe the Federation sent them straight to the radio stations across our state. They did that for every state. I let him know that. So to say that we have been uncooperative is simply not true. Anytime they've asked me for information, we have provided it. And so I was a little taken aback by that statement. But as past President Simmons has said, we have wanted to work with the General Assembly, but we can only do that when we are invited to come to the table to share information so that we can work together in a partnership.
Thank you, Commissioner Tucker. Next question is Caleb Tallman. I'm not sure what your outlet is, but if you'll state what outlet you are from and open your mic to ask your question, Caleb.
I am with Fetch You News, Team F-Line Sports out of the Western North Carolina side of the state. We cover a lot of small 1A schools. My question is directed for any of the leadership, or specifically Q Tucker. I'm hearing a lot of facts stated, but I have not heard why HB 91 would be a bad thing, other than the fact that it would take away power from those currently in power. I'd like to hear why you think it's a bad thing, other than the fact that you guys would be the ones losing your power, because oftentimes these changes to me seem like it could be possibly open the floor for better representation for some of our smaller schools, the way it would be distributed along a bigger board of people, not just a couple of people making all the decisions?
Well, first of all, Caleb, let me say that and I mentioned this early on, the North Carolina High School Athletic Association has a set of bylaws by which we operate and do what we do. It is designed to be representative of the membership. It is designed in those bylaws. It is very specific in how we reach out, and so that we have representation for the 1A schools, representation for the 2A, 3A, 4A, that we have every position represented on our board, and that we would have each of the regions represented, so that in the western part of the state, there would be at least 2 members on the board of directors from Western North Carolina. This year, we actually had, this year that just ended, we had 3 people on our board from Western North Carolina. So the idea that it would be a good thing to dismantle the association, perhaps I could get there, Caleb, if when I read that House Bill 91, it is going to be dismantled, and then the responsibilities would be basically the same as what we already have, with the exception of now you have thrown in a political flavor. So the governor will appoint 9 members. The Senate will appoint 4 members. The House of Representatives will appoint 4 members for that commission. And so currently, the way we're structured, it's not about political parties. It's not about politics, the Senate versus the House of Representatives, or who happens to be in power as the governor. So if we're going to politicize high school athletics, education-based athletics, then that's exactly what would happen if we would dismantle the High School Athletic Association the way it exists, and then bring in the politics truly into the mix. I cannot understand how that would be a good thing for anybody. Does there need to be changes as we go along? Absolutely. We've never said that we are a perfect organization. And we have admitted that as we have done some things over the last several years, we maybe didn't go quite as far as we needed to do, but I think it is evident that this board is ready to make some of those big changes, such as what came out of our spring board meeting. We now give scholarships. One of the things that was addressed in the way this would be broken down is that this new organization would get out of the scholarship business. Well, I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing. Are we giving enough scholarships? Maybe not. But clearly that is something that we could address, as opposed to doing away with scholarships, which is what was suggested this afternoon in House Bill 91. So it's not a power struggle for us. It's certainly not one for me, Caleb. I don't do this job because I feel like I'm a powerful person in North Carolina. I do what I do because I believe in education-based athletics, and I believe that what we've done over the last 109 years has worked, and I believe that it can continue to work, and so there's really no need to totally dismantle it.
James, may I speak to that question?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And thank you so much for the question. I really appreciate it. This past year and the last 4 years, I had the opportunity to work closely, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying his name, with Neil Blankenship, who's the athletic director of Swain County, about as far west as you can get. I serve on the coast of North Carolina, so geographically, we're about as far apart as we could be. As I look at the language in House Bill 91, the commission would be a very similar size commission to our current board of directors, and would be made up of superintendents, principals, full-time employees serving as coaches. And so it would be similar positions that would make up that same commission. And so we have now a representative board. The one difference is our board is elected by our membership. And so our board members are elected by the schools we serve, as opposed to appointed by someone in Raleigh. And so I do believe that we're representative of the state. I know that we have representatives from 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A, and from each region across the state. And I believe we've benefited from that, having the opportunity to work with my colleagues from across the state as we talk about issues that may impact different regions of the state in a different way has been very, very eye-opening, and I very much have appreciated it. Thank you for allowing me to chime in there.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson and Commissioner Tucker. Our next question is from Nick Stevens, High School OT. Nick, go ahead with your question.
Thank you. Q, I got two questions for you. One, you said that you thought there were some political things at play here when you read the bill. I'm just curious if you can elaborate on what exactly you think that is, if there's specific things or if it's just the way that the commission is set up. Also, is there any plans to reach out, or have you reached out to any of the legislators after today to talk to them about any of these issues, or have they reached out to you? And for any of the school staff on here, how do you think this would change, this bill, if it were to pass, how do you think it would change high school sports at the school level for student athletes? And I know that's a lot of questions, so I apologize.
Okay, so Nick, let me start by saying to date, I have not reached out about House Bill 91. Remember now, I was only informed about House Bill 91 this morning. House Bill 91, as most of you know, when it was put out there, it didn't deal with high school athletics. It was an autism bill. And so somewhere along the way, it changed. And so that when you actually hit, if you as a member of the general public wanted to watch it this afternoon, when you went on their website, it didn't say accountability and fair play in athletics. It still had the autism wording and language there. So we've not had an opportunity to reach out to any members ourselves specifically, but we do, several of our board members have reached out. And so we will continue some of that discussion as we move into tomorrow. But as to who was in this committee meeting, I don't even know all of the players who were there today, other than the three people who talked. As to the political nature of all of this, well, I think anytime you say that the governor is going to make an appointment, anytime you say that the Senate will make an appointment, and anytime you say that the House of Representatives will make an appointment, I don't know how you cannot believe that that has some political implications. Everybody who serves in the General Assembly has some political affiliation. And so if we start down that road, the General Assembly by its very makeup is political. And so if our schools and our membership is going to be governed by the General Assembly, certainly there will be a political implication, so that when the Senate appoints its members, how will that be done? Who will those persons be? We see what happens in Washington, D.C. Every time they get ready to appoint people to committees, it becomes very political. So I don't think we can, at least I can't. So I'm giving you my personal opinion. I don't see how I can separate any of that. It is concerning to me, Nick, that in all of the years that this endowment has been in place and it has grown, that it has now, here I am sitting in this chair, and I now am the one who is being really targeted in a real sense about the monies. I know I sit in that leadership chair. I do not shy away from that. But certainly one would not have to wonder, well, why wasn't Mr. Adams brought before the General Assembly when this was put in place, when it started to grow? Why wasn't Davis Whitfield brought in to talk about why we were not doing more? So, I understand where we are today. I understand the political climate in which we live. And so, again, I'm not speaking for the NCHSAA. This is Q Tucker speaking because you asked me what I thought and why I believe that it is. There are some political implications to what could come about. I think the third piece of your question had to do with how would this change high school athletics if it were to go into existence, and that I think maybe is something that Jerry and Rob might want to address because they are principals and superintendents.
And Q and Nick, I'll just jump in and say, look, I actually have reached out to one of our folks who spoke earlier this afternoon, and that was Senator McGinnis, and that was probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago. And he and I had the opportunity to talk extensively because I'll just tell you, at the time I was serving as president of our board, and I wanted to understand his position because things had started to move in this direction at that time. And I was actually on driving to go and support my Bears. We were playing in Pikeville that evening. So we had a very long conversation, and I thought we had a fruitful conversation. And the first hearing where the association staff and I went along with Commissioner Tucker for that. Senator McGinnis and I had an opportunity to talk then, and I thought it was very good. So I'll just say it. I'm really hurt. I think I said that in my opening comments this evening. I'm hurt by what's going on now. But as far as what will change, I don't know. I mean, I'm one listening to some of the conversation this afternoon in our General Assembly. I've served as principal at schools where we have been fined because we've not done our due diligence on different situations that we had to pay fines before. And honestly, I wasn't happy about it at the time, but to be quite honest with you, I like the fact that we're being governed in such a way that that when we take to the field or to the court, we feel like things are in as close to fair as possible. And so I appreciate the fact that our association exists to make certain that's the case. And as recently as this spring, another matter that came up this afternoon in our General Assembly, my Bears, who I'm so proud of, we were eliminated from the state playoffs and in the regional finals by a private school. But honestly, I felt like the better team won that evening. So can changes be made? And absolutely. And the mechanisms are already in place. If our membership has the will to make those changes, then those changes will be made. And those changes haven't been made before. But I do worry as a school personnel, I do worry about the bureaucracy and as Q has already alluded to, the political side that could quite possibly influence what needs to be pure when it comes to our student athletes, our coaches, and our member schools now. So I do worry about that. That is in no way meant to say that I don't think good people are in our House of Representatives and our Senate. And that's the reason why I reached out to them, trying to find something in the way of some common ground, but we just haven't been able to find that yet. And I emphasize yet because I don't believe the conversations are done.
Jerry, thank you. And Nick, thank you for the question. I'll just simply add that the High School Athletic Association, as Commissioner Tucker mentioned, has been in existence for 110 years. And so what that means is that we literally have grandparents and parents who are in the stands supporting their children and grandchildren in the same organization they participated in. There's something to be said for tradition, for having a feel for the ebb and flow of how high school athletics feel and actually operate in our state. Now, that's not to say we don't learn and grow and improve. We do. We try our very best to continue to be better today than we were yesterday and better still tomorrow. But as I think about the change from the High School Athletic Association to some other organization in a year's time, and all the work that would have to be done to spin up all of the rules and regulations, all of the training that takes place, all of the organization of conferences and contracts for ball games, that is a lot of work, which would cause lots of change for our schools. And so I think one of the impacts that would be felt immediately would be just all of the impact of that change and having to learn a new way of operating and not really having the opportunity to draw on past experience. We have many experienced coaches across our state and administrators across our state who have a good feel for how things work in high school athletics. And they have that feel because our high school athletics are governed by our schools through our schools representatives. And so that certainly would be one of the impacts. And of course, I just saw this bill this afternoon, and so haven't had a whole lot of time to process it, but that's something that struck me right off, is just the magnitude of the change that our student athletes and coaches and athletic administrators would have to absorb in a very short time.
Yeah, thank you to all three of you for that. Thank you, Nick, for the question. Next question is coming from Brian Hanks down in Kinston. Brian, go ahead.
Okay, Q, thank you for doing this, James. Thank you. I have two questions, and then both of them are for you, Q. You did a good job of explaining how we've gotten to this point. Why do you think that we have gotten to this point right now, Q? And then my second question would be, if House Bill 91 is passed, I've had a chance to read through it a few times now, tangibly for the layman, what does that mean for the North Carolina High School Athletic Association?
Q, you'll need to unmute.
My fault. I would like to say that perhaps we've gotten to this point partly. I'd like to be able to blame it, Brian, on COVID. I think COVID had a way of causing angst in the general public that put everything out when we were not able to play, when we had limited fans in the stands, and when it gave the appearance that the NCHSAA, meaning I as the commissioner, because that's what everybody thought, all that I had to do was just simply to reach out to Governor Cooper or to Dr. Cohen and say, we need to open up our facilities now that football is about to start. That because we were not able to do the things that the general public wanted us to do immediately, once we were able to start, everybody thought we made that turn when football was about ready to begin at the end of February. It wasn't happening fast enough. I think that caused some issues. I think we can go back even further than that, Brian. I think some of this started back in 2019 when we had a school that was in Senator McGinnis's area of the state that did not make the playoffs, and he shared that with. I think he's shared that with others. Perhaps with Nick on High School OT. He talked about the fact that one of his teams in his area did not make the playoffs. So I think that bothered people. I think when you have an organization that sometimes has to say no to people, when you have an organization that has rules and regulations that will sometimes have to penalize folks, I think that concerns people, and people do not like to be said no to. I think our school people will tell you that, one of the hardest things they deal with now is when they say no to a parent, is that parents simply just will not take no to mean no. And I think that's part of what has happened as we've gone along. There have been some times when we've said some things that have meant no, or have meant that it would bar a team from making the playoffs due to it being in violation of one of our rules. I think the COVID fatigue and all that happened with that sort of created a perfect storm, if you would say. And then, Brian, I don't mind to say that I think our good fortune um, and you can spin that in the way you like. The fact that the investments that we've had over time have done extremely well. It causes people to not like the fact that our investments have done well, and they want that money to be expended perhaps in a faster manner, or they don't understand sometimes, especially the general public. They don't understand the process. Our membership doesn't truly understand that $41 million does not mean we have $41 million sitting in a closet somewhere where we can put our hands on. And so that's on us to do a better job of that if we have that opportunity to be able to kind of explain what $41 million in net assets means. It doesn't mean that I can go and get that money. That's not how it works. And so I think we are, sort of a victim of our good fortune, so to speak, and that bothers people at this point in time. And so that it has just all sort of come together. The other part of what was the second component of that?
Just asking you tangibly for folks who may not have read HB 91, what does that mean? If it is passed, what does that mean to the North Carolina High School Athletic Association?
Well, I think first, and Vice President Jackson alluded to it quite well. It means that in a year's time, if our staff as it currently exists, I as the commissioner, in 1 year's time would no longer sit in these positions unless somebody appoints us. As I read the language, there will be a 1 year lame duck. It would be a lame duck year for this staff, and I would imagine our board of directors. It would mean that in 22-23, there would be a new regime, and that they would then work closer, I guess, with the State Board of Education, and that essentially, our staff members would not be able to do what we do. I also read in that language that if it passes, the only way that we would be able to function for 21-22, which, as you all know, is just a couple of weeks away, that we would have to agree to some conditions that they have put in. One of those being that we would no longer fine schools, and that we would, there was another clause they had in there, but essentially that we would have to meet, or that we would agree to an audit. And I'm guessing it would be an audit from the state, because we already have an external audit, a third-party audit every year. So that if we were to say, well, no, we're not doing that, then the State Board of Education would have to, I guess, indicate another entity to govern our athletics for 21-22. As I read it, in the short amount of time I've had to read it, that's what I've gleaned from it, Brian. So, there are some major implications, I think, for the 427 member schools right now, if this does pass.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Tucker. We do have a couple more questions. I see a person named Chris with their hand up. I'm not sure exactly who that might be, but if you'll identify yourself and your outlet, go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. This is Chris Hughes with Charlotte Observer, Talking Preps, also NC Preps. I wanted to ask the question, and you just mentioned the fines, but it was also kind of suggested somewhat of a lack of transparency through maybe some heavy-handedness through the appeals process. I know they kind of tongue-in-cheek used the analogy of Andy Griffith being the ticketer and the justice of the peace, but wanted to see if you could give any thoughts on that and that suggestion. And also just in wrap up, and I know you said that you were open to any correspondence and conversation with the legislature moving forward, and to what degree of maybe transparency or any oversight or any working with them are you guys as an association willing to do moving forward to potentially avoid this, this nuclear option that they presented today?
Okay, so let me address the specific question or that one of the members in attendance. was Eastern Alamance, and was stated that Eastern Alamance had to pay an $18,000 fine. Well, let me clear that up right now. That is not true. Our fines for using an ineligible player, which Eastern Alamance did use, was a $500 fine. Now, the rest of the money, and I don't remember exactly how much it was, but it was a sizable amount of money that they had to return to the association. That was their monies realized by participating in the state football playoffs. In our rules and regulations, it says that if you participate in the playoffs and you use an ineligible player, then you return any monies, any awards that you received during the time that you had an ineligible dress to participate. So I want to make that clear that there is a difference. We don't have an $18,000 fine. So it was the use of an ineligible, $500 was the fine, and then they had to forfeit. And then because of their success in the playoffs, it meant they had to return that amount of money. As to the transparency, one of the things that we shared with the athletic directors over the last couple of days, we talked about the fact that we have just now the athletic directors and our coaches association put together a committee that will be charged, or they will meet on scheduled to meet July 27th, and their task is to look at the investments, the endowed dollars, and those monies, how they can best be distributed back to the membership, using a spending policy that the board of directors updated and approved this past spring meeting. So that's another way of transparency. And we shared with our athletic directors yesterday, broke it out so that they can see that the net assets, we right now do not know what the net assets of the association are because we just finished this fiscal year. So it will always be our intention as we move forward to make sure that the membership has a better understanding. People just do not understand endowments in general. So we need to do a better job on our end if we have that opportunity to be able to say, here is what we have, here's how it is spent, here's where, what monies go into this pot, etc. In terms of where we go from here and how would we be willing to work with the General Assembly, well, I guess that really depends on them. They have put together this proposal. I'm not real sure that there is any part of the proposal that they put out there that we would want to sit down to negotiate, because that bill is basically designed to dismantle the NCHSAA as we exist. We have already been in discussions with the State Board of Education about a more formal memorandum of understanding, which is one of the things that, if you guys will remember, back on April 15th, I was questioned about, do you have anything in writing that says that you work with the State Board of Education? And I said no. But it is very clear in the minutes. It's very clear in some of the language of documents that we found and have in our archives that there was always that understanding. It just was not written. And if you think back to when people did business back in the days, it was probably just a gentleman's agreement. They shook hands and said, this is how we're going to do things. I remember my granddaddy doing business, shaking hands with a businessman, but they didn't have anything in writing. So the State Board of Education had already, we've already had a meeting, and that was already in the works of trying to get together to put a more formal memorandum of understanding in place. Now, in the language of the bill, I believe I saw that that would be one of the conditions for us being able to operate this year, that there would have to be a memorandum of understanding. So, I think, Chris, that, the proof is in the pudding. It would mean that as a staff, as a board of directors, we would need to see what it is that the General Assembly would like to put out there where we could find that negotiating room. What are some things that they would be willing to back off of and say, okay, here's what we want. Here's what we'd like to talk about. I think the state board is willing to do that. We have rules that we have followed since I've been with the association that are their rules. And so it's not like we have dismissed them or dissed them, as the kids say. I mean, you know, we follow their rules and regulations. And so we're willing to work with the State Board of Education. We're willing to listen to the General Assembly, especially the folks who are part of this subcommittee. I'm just not real sure right now where all of that is and whether they have any, if they're willing to do that.
Thank you, Commissioner Tucker. We do have one more hand raised from Joe Serrera. Joe, I'll let you go ahead and ask another follow-up.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Based on what you heard at today's hearing, where you've basically been asked to defend the NCHSAA's very existence, where do you go from here? Will you attend the legislative hearing that they say they're going to hold tomorrow, or address the legislators during the public comment period tomorrow?
I have not had any opportunity to discuss that with our board of directors. I've not had an opportunity to discuss any of that outside of my staff in terms of, you know, I wasn't real sure what was going to happen tomorrow. I did get something before we got on this call that indicated there probably is going to be some presentation tomorrow. But I'm not real sure how fruitful it would be for us to attend. Because again, you know, I just had the feeling and have the feeling that the die is cast. I think they've stuck their, you know, stick in the sand, and here's the way it's going to be. I certainly will be reaching out perhaps to some others who I think maybe will have an opportunity to vote. I think that may be where, you know, my time is better served to try to be sure that others who will be voting clearly understand who we are as the NCHSAA and what our mission is and what our vision of education-based athletics is all about. And, you know, but certainly if that's something that our board feels would be of benefit, I certainly will try to attend. But right now I have no idea when that meeting will be, et cetera. So not real sure, Joe, what will happen on tomorrow.
Thank you, Q. We do have one final question here tonight as we wrap things up. Mike Solarte from Spectrum News. Mike, if you'll go ahead.
Oh, are you already unmuted me? All right, thank you. Q, we've known each other a long time, and tonight you've been very measured in your responses and wearing the leadership cap for the organization. But at the root of this, are you just kind of incensed that this is all coming together like this, and that the General Assembly has put forth this proposal and basically, you know, it, like you say, the dice, you feel like the die's been cast. It just doesn't, to me, it just doesn't make any sense. But from a personal standpoint, how do you go forward in trying to keep the association going that's been going for over 100 years?
Well, yeah, am I incensed? Yes. I'm like Jerry said, you know, I'm hurt because you would like to think that the things you've done, you know, in the past count for something. So that is hurtful. But, you know, I have, Mike, I have about 15 folk who come to work every day, and they're dedicated. They believe in education-based athletics like I do. So that's what keeps me going. I know their passion, I know their commitment. And so I'll do everything I can to try to help them do what we do. You know, my nature is that, you know, my dad always said, you work hard, you do the right thing, and treat people like you want to be treated, and then it'll all work out. Well, I still believe that today. So that's what will help me get through tomorrow, is to try to see if there is a way. I'm not going to close my mind to that this may turn around, but if it doesn't, we're going to do everything, or I'm going to do everything I can to look after my staff and to make sure that they're protected.
Thank you for that question, Mike. And obviously, I will personally thank Commissioner Tucker for that that follow-up, as it does mean a lot to those of us on our staff. And I will say, just personally, I'll add some comments here. Mike, I work with 15 of the greatest people that I have known. And the reason that they come to work every day is because they love high school athletics and because it had an impact on their lives. It had a great impact on my life. In fact, yesterday I had to go over and present some awards at the coaches clinic, and we presented lifesaver citations to 3 athletic trainers and 2 coaches who's literally their actions saved the lives of 2 young people who collapsed in competition or at practice for us this past year. That is possible because of the hard work that people at the association do, because of the hard work that athletic directors do at the local level, and because of the hard work that coaches, principals, and all those types of folks do across the state to make athletics available to kids, because it's had an impact and it's been positive on more people. And it does a great job of keeping kids involved in education and reaching kids that otherwise might slip through the cracks. And so I'm fortunate enough that I wasn't one of those kids that might slip through the cracks, but I did know people in high school that would have gone down that road, and their coach, their athletic director, their teacher was able to keep them engaged in their educational pursuits because they were able to participate in athletics. That's why we do what we do. And to be perfectly honest, whatever the General Assembly does over the course of the next however long this continues, we will continue to work to do what's best for those student athletes and for our member schools who serve those student athletes. That's what we'll do as a staff. And I appreciate and applaud Commissioner Tucker for her grace in dealing with this. To be perfectly honest, when you question her integrity, and when you question the integrity of this association, it's offensive to me, because it's some of the most stand-up people that I've ever worked with. And they're just outstanding folks. And I don't say that just because they pay me. And I don't say that just because, I work there. I say that because I truly do love those people, and I truly do love high school athletics in North Carolina. So with that, I will wrap things up this evening, and we appreciate each of you that took the time to be on this call with us tonight. I want to say a special thank you to those members of the North Carolina Athletic Directors Association, Roy Turner, to Joe Franks, to Mac Morris, who made time to be on this call tonight in their busy schedules. And I want to say thank you to our members of our board of directors, Jerry Simmons and Rob Jackson, who were on the call with us tonight. So thank you for all that you do, and thank you for what you continue to do for high school athletics. And we thank each of you media members for what you do for high school athletics in helping to tell the story of the good things that go on, as well as some of the difficult things. But we do appreciate what you do, and we don't tell you that enough, but we do appreciate you. So thank you all for being on tonight. And if there's anything else that we can do, please feel free to reach out to me via email. My email is James, JAMES, @NCHSAA.org. So with that, we'll say good night to you all.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.